Well, welcome everybody, and very especially the attendees that are here today. Um, and I really appreciate that. Welcome, Kelly and Chris. Okay, welcome again. Today we are getting, in fact, into a field that many people actually know and excel at it. And more people think they do, but in fact, they don't. Graduate students need to master how to present their ideas in a clear, organized, and convincing way. And that's why I have created this webinar. So, as usual, you will have some basic elements about how to transmit your ideas successfully by means of presentations. More details are not possible in just one webinar. Welcome, Joanna, Chamandi, and my dear Andrew. Okay. Look at this quote. Today's quote illustrates the essence of a good presentation. The way you communicate your ideas is certainly more important than the idea itself. You may think that I'm being inappropriate because I'm diminishing the power of knowledge, subordinating it to the means of presenting it. However, communication is the act of transferring information to other people, but such act is not as simple as it may look at first sight. Why? Because information includes ideas, but also emotions, cultural issues, the medium used to communicate, etc. Therefore, the way you use to transfer all those elements makes them something to remember. An idea transferred without its complex environment may be something easily forgotten. That's what we are going to explore in this webinar. Welcome, Pipit and Becky. To do that, I will follow this agenda. As the subtitle says, the key to a good presentation is to make it seem effortless, something that flows so easily that audience may think that even if the theme is complicated, it can be fully grasped. How can you achieve that? Well, considering the three main elements presented in the slide. Topic: presentation itself and presenter. And to finish the webinar, not right now, but in some moments, I will give you some hints and tricks recommended by experts and by my experience. But before getting into those elements, let's be sure we all have at least a common basic interpretation of what a presentation is, so you can reflect upon common grounds. A presentation is a means of communication that can be adapted to various speaking situations, such as talking to a group, addressing a meeting, briefing a team, and also other, let's call them speaking engagements, like talking in a celebration, for instance. A presentation requires you to get a message across to the listeners and will often contain a persuasive element. It may, for example, be to talk about the positive work you are doing in your research study, what you could offer an employer, or why you should receive additional funding for a project. In simple terms, it is a way of communicating your thoughts and ideas to an audience orally. And that's what makes it exciting. Because unlike writing, you will always need to be prepared for unexpected events, questions, audience reactions, etc., which will challenge you at your improvisation skills. Now, let's talk about the first element you need to consider when preparing a presentation. And I want to emphasize the word preparing, because despite the fact presentations imply a certain degree of improvisation, they have to be well prepared so you can challenge your audience to think about your points and avoid misinterpretations. What you want to talk about must be clearly defined in your mind before developing your presentation. And these are 4 elements related to your topic that you have to take into account when preparing a presentation. Relevance. One of your goals is that the audience will walk away feeling that your presentation informed them, and that implies that its topic is relevant for them, that is timely and interesting. A relevant topic is one that is appropriate for the moment. This is because its information is recent, or your point of view is different, or it just adds to the state of a conversation around a particular topic. Another way to make the topic of a presentation relevant is to consider the audience who will hear your speech. You have to ask yourself, what topic would the audience find interesting or useful? If you feel committed to a particular topic, then begin thinking about how you can demonstrate why the topic is relevant to your audience. Doing this requires that you articulate why they should care about your chosen topic. But remember that as a graduate student, you should try to communicate this in an unbiased way that does not rely heavily on emotional appeals. Welcome, Erica, Peter, Michelle, Kelly. Now, purpose. Imagine you are preparing for a trip. You prepare your suitcase, fold and pack your clothes into your suitcase. Most of the clothes you prepare are shirts and suits or skirts. After you finish packing, you are ready to go ahead. Unfortunately, you are going to the mountain for vacation, and you cannot wear your clothes in that mountain. That is what you will feel if you prepare a presentation while you are not knowing the purpose of the presentation. Without knowing the purpose of your presentation, you won't do the presentation well and properly. Your presentation will be a waste of time for both of you and the audience eventually. You cannot give the proper information and the audience cannot get all the points. Your presentation must be well prepared in order to be able to give information to the audience properly. There are 2 main kinds of giving information. One, giving information to those who don't know about the topic yet. So you inform them. And 2, persuade people to use something they already know. So it's to convince. The informative presentation is usually done in front of the audiences who don't know yet about the topic or are not familiar with the topic. Here you must give facts and data so that at the end of your presentation, the audience has got new information. For this type of presentation, the preparation you have to do is make an understandable material. But the persuasive presentation, the one that usually a graduate student has to do, is a little bit more complicated. Here you will face the audiences who already know and are familiar to the topic you are going to present, but they are not interested to it yet. This type of presentation requires your best communication skill. At the end of your presentation, the audiences are expected to change their minds. That's what you want to do with your committee, your dissertation committee, to change their minds toward your point of view. Those who are not interested to the topic are now interested in that, or at least they are willing to try to use that. This is the kind of presentation associated to thesis and dissertation. Besides informing and persuading, there are other purposes that you may have for the presentation. For instance, educate, activate, motivate or inspire, and entertain. But any graduate student must know how to inform and persuade. The third one is the topic itself. You have to consider the characteristics of the topic. Is it simple and apparently a straightforward topic? Or is it a complex one? In the first case, your mission is to make it attractive and interesting, and also show any unknown characteristic that appeals to the audience. In the second case, you have to make it understandable by means of deconstructing it into its elements, main relationships, and possible uses of application. That's what I do in my webinar, deconstruct the topic and then put it into terms that you can handle and that you can, and give you some ideas to apply that knowledge. And the last topic to consider is mastery of it. This is the one essential preparation skill. It's the one thing you cannot do without. Consider yourself a defender of your topic. Consider yourself as the person that needs to help the topic reach the audience, and this is your crucial mission. And if you are not a master of the topic, that is absolutely not possible. You are at the center of the stage. Everyone is looking at you or listening to you. And what do they see or what do they hear? They see or hear your abilities, and you need to be ready for that spotlight. You need to be ready to shine, because even if you are very good at delivery and know all the tips and tricks, that won't save you from lack of knowledge. So you must know what you are talking about. The four elements of these slides are the input you need to develop the next element. Let's see which one is that. We are going to talk about the presentation itself. You know what you want to talk about, have established a purpose, have determined the relevance of the topic, know if it is simple or complex, and have a solid knowledge of it. Now, the question is, how do you need to show it so as to have a successful presentation? Let's see that. Like with any important task, planning is a key step. Although, as I said before, you have to be prepared for unexpected things, you have to be prepared for the expected ones. The first thing to think about is what the slide says. The answer to that question will show you the main idea you want to communicate, and then you can build your presentation around it and the purpose of you have established for that exchange of idea. However, you have to consider other things to achieve a great presentation. So you are aware of what is the main idea that you want to communicate. And that's the beginning, that's the necessary input. To take into account these other essential elements when planning your presentation. Audience. You need to identify your audience and adapt your presentation to their interest, level of understanding, attitudes, and belief. You can have one theme, but if you have different types of audiences, you have to create different types of presentation. It's not the same to present something to people who know about what you are talking about than to present it to people who don't, or to people who are younger enough to look for something else or for different things. So taking an audience-centered approach is important because a speaker's effectiveness will be improved if the presentation is created and delivered in an appropriate manner. However, identifying the audience through extensive research is often difficult, but you should know at least their basic characteristics, and you may often rely on the healthy use of imagination. Adapted to audience doesn't mean to tell what they want to hear, but mainly to transmit your message in terms that they can understand and identify with. To know your audience, you have to know, first, their expectation about occasion, topic, and you, the speaker. Violating audience expectation can have a negative impact on the effectiveness of your speech. You also have to know audience knowledge of the topic because it can vary widely on any given occasion. Therefore, you should find out what audience already knows about the topic. Never overestimate or underestimate the audience knowledge of a topic. Try to do some research to find out what the audience already knows about the topic. Giving a brief review of important terms and concepts is almost always appropriate. That's what I use when I begin complex webinars or webinars about complex topics. I always begin explaining some concepts so everybody can have at least a common knowledge of what I'm going to talk about. And you can sometimes, that can be sometimes done by acknowledging that the audience is made of different kinds of people and the importance of putting everyone on the same page. That's what you do when you explain concepts and terms. This is what I do, as I told you, and nearly every webinar. The third thing that you have to know is audience members' attitudes about the topic, because they will help you determine the best way to reach your goals. If that is not possible beforehand, try some questions about that at the beginning of the presentation. And that's an example of how you can improvise, making some adjustment to your speech. So it is important to know something about the attitude of the audience about the topic. And you can know that just asking some simple questions at the beginning of a live presentation, for instance. Another thing talking about audience is that many elements of a presentation change in accordance with audience size. In general, the larger the audience, the more formal the presentation should be. Sitting down and using common language when speaking to a group of 10 people is often quite appropriate. However, that style of presentation would probably be inappropriate or ineffective if you are speaking to 1,000 people. To finish the audience element, I have to say that the demographic factors of an audience include age, gender, religion, ethnic background, class, sexual orientation, occupation, education, group membership, and countless other categories. Since these categories often organize individuals' identities and experiences, a wise speaker attends to them, but don't stereotype your audience based on demographics. Just be careful with your language and use of terms. That's the main point. If you know age, gender, religion, ethnic background, that kind of things, you can choose your words properly. Now, let's talk about the second element, place. The setting of a presentation can influence the ability or your ability to give a presentation and the audience ability and desire to listen. Some of these factors are, for example, the setup of the room, both size and how the audience is arranged, time of day, temperature, external noises, internal noises, baby crying or people coughing, and type of a space. It's a church, it's a school room, it's outside. So find it out ahead of time, the different factors going into the setting, even if it is online, will allow you to adapt your presentation appropriately. If not, will there be a stage? Will there be a podium? What technology aids will be available? How are the seats arranged? What is the order of speakers? Now let's talk about type of delivery. Is it an online presentation or a face-to-face one? That is important to know. Do you master the meeting software if it is an online presentation? I have to tell you that the first time that I used Zoom, it was a disaster. Now, I think I manage it now. Is it a visual presentation? Is it a podcast? Those things are important to know in order to choose the other elements of the presentation. And the next one is when. You may think that this is not necessary to talk about, but there will often be no flexibility in the time of day that a presentation is made. However, it does affect what you can do and how you might organize your presentation because of the likely state of your audience. Suppose the morning is the best time to speak because people are generally at their most alert. However, as it gets toward lunchtime, people begin to feel hungry and lose concentration. After lunch, people often feel sleepy and lethargic. If you are given a slot immediately after lunch, listen to this, it's a good idea to get your audience involved. A discussion or getting your audience moving about will work a lot better than simply presenting a lot of slides. You have to make them move so they can be attended. Towards the end of the afternoon, people again tend to lose concentration as they start to worry about getting home, the traffic, or collecting children from school. Outside regular office hours, people are more likely to be present because they want to be rather than because they have to be there. There is a better chance of audience attention in the evening. However, if the presentation goes on for too long, people may have to leave before you have finished. So people will also be less tolerant of a poor presentation because you are in their time, not their employer's time. Length of talk. Always find out how long you have to talk and check if this includes or excludes time for questions. It is important to remember that people find it difficult to maintain concentration for long periods of time. This is a good reason for making presentations succinct, well-structured, and interesting. Aim for 45 minutes as a maximum single session presentation, and preferably leave at least 10 or 15 minutes for questions. This will give you a good idea about the achievement of your purpose. Unfortunately, with this specific webinar, I'm going to go a little further than 45 minutes because there are many things that I want you just to at least present it to you so you can research about them. And finally, sequence. Wow, this is so important. Define a coherent and easy to follow sequence to develop your topic. Begin with a grabbing attention slide so as to trigger the audience interest in what you are going to talk about. That's what I do with my code. Use an agenda to give them a roadmap of the presentation and avoid that they spend time guessing what will be next. Give a brief explanation of concepts or important terms so everybody can feel comfortable with their knowledge of the topic basics. If it is a complex topic, deconstruct it in its element and main relationship so the whole context in which the topic exists or emerges can be interpreted. Present your ideas clearly and connect them to the various parts of the presentation so the whole talk flows smoothly and coherently. Depending on the topic, present examples or application in order to connect your topic to the audience reality and finish either with the main idea of your presentation or a call to action. So I have included this slide because it really illustrates the importance of the audience of a presentation. Of all the elements presented in the previous slide, audience is the most important one. To have a successful presentation, you must connect to the audience. Focus on the points we mentioned about the audience, and you will have a great starting point for your presentation. Now, let's see some basic principles to apply when designing a visual presentation. It is funny, right? I wanted to include this because I think it is important that you have at least some some basic design principles that may help you create your slides. Then you can expand them according to your interests and needs. Let's begin with visual hierarchy. This principle refers to guide the audience attention to the points the presenter considers important for achieving the goal. You give your audience visual clues and play with size, color, proximity, and repetition to communicate hierarchy and make your presentation more understandable and enjoyable. Okay? For example, here you have my focus, my visual hierarchy, something in the center and other things around it in smaller letters, okay? You can show your audience where to begin and take into account how they absorb information based on their culture. If you are talking to people who read from right to left, is different the way of presenting your content than the usual one. Use color and organization of elements to show importance, but be careful using color. Prefer shades of a color than completely different colors. More important is presented bigger. Less important is presented smaller. Create relationship through proximity. If you have things that are related, put it together, or at least near. Numerous elements of similar style, position, and scale create a harmony and a rhythm that an audience will acknowledge and will understand to be a closer linking relationship. Repetition not only makes slide navigation easier for an audience, but also allows you to visually group or distinguish elements. When I talk about repetition, I remember that you have to repeat many things in your dissertation, and you think, oh, not again, I have to say the same thing again. You have to, in order to connect things. With this principle, visual hierarchy, you can design slides that make a little more sense, slides that lead the audience in a logical order and inform them effectively. Now, focal point. If you want to know what focal point is, look at the center of the circle in this slide. It's an area of interest to get the audience attention as soon as they watch the slide of a presentation. This is the most important part of the slide and therefore has to be attractive and convincing. Without a focal point, audience attention goes from one part of the slide to another without finding something that grabs it. Do you know what is, well, I have already tell you what is the focal point of this slide. So each slide should have one focal point. It's like a paragraph. Each paragraph has one main idea. Each slide has one focal point. And it should express a point you want the audience to understand. You can create a focal point by means of an image, an idea in very few words, an emotion represented by a story or a headline or a quote, or an infographic. Design the rest of the slide around the focal point so audience can follow the flow of the secondary and tertiary ideas. We are going to see some example after I finish talking about this. Simplicity. Avoid creating a slide full of things. You put a lot of things in the slide. That diverts audience attention. Simplicity is, in fact, a kind of art. The goal is to build a clean, focused, and interesting design. It should be both simple and significant. How can you do that? Include only the most important ideas or concepts. Don't try to put everything in one slide. Divide text into titles and subtitles. Present content organized in lists. Use not more than 3 colors or type of fonts. As Adriel says, less is more. And less is more when we talk about white space. This principle is related to simplicity. It refers to the need of leaving blank spaces that give audience eyes some relaxation and to equilibrate the content of the slide so as to foster concentration. Text should be not more than 40% of the total space. Your eyes need to relax. Legibility. The University of Alabama proposes 5 rules to ensure legibility. Write not more than 40 words per slide. Avoid font sizes smaller than 28 point. Use black text on a white or a light green background. Use red, blue, or green colors for highlights, and use pattern repetition throughout your presentation. You can also add not to include images to decorate. It's not to put an image, that's beautiful, let's put it there. No, use only images that provide significance to the message. And finally, consistency. To ensure the consistency of your presentation, you can follow these rules. Keep it simple. Have a title slide that stands out. Limit animation and transition. If you have to use them, use just 1 or 2 types of animations and transition. Use high quality images. Alter images to focus on elements. Use suitable charts and graphs. Keep a fixed column pattern and repeat design patterns. Okay. Look that we have, Dr. Annette, we have one kind of slides with a color. And for one webinar, today's webinar's color is purple, for instance. I just said 28 point in font is very big though. Yeah, but that depends on what you are doing. Here I have some points that are smaller, but there are such amount of white space that they can be fully grasped. Now let's see some examples and counterexamples of these principles. Now, look at the side, which is the main element of the message. I mean, before this was the person created, but then this changes to this. So what is the most important thing? The person wanted to talk about the astronaut, not the planet. Okay? Let's see now a classical example. Focal point is what I have already presented to you. And this is a beautiful example of the use of white space. And if you want to look at a counterexample of that and something that includes exactly that code of Steve Jobs, this is a counterexample of white space. You have 3 codes of Steve Jobs, and then you have the Apple here, and you have a Steve. Well, there are too many things to look at. It is better if you create one slide for each code. Now, remember what simplicity is. Okay? It's a matter of paying attention what is meaningful. Now, let's see an understandable message. This is legibility in action. Included, look at the fingers that reinforce the idea of three concepts. Okay? And let's see quite the opposite. Look at that. Okay, now let's go to you as the presenter. What should you do? Let's see. These are some of the characteristics that have been identified in good presenters. Confidence. To be an interesting and believable presenter, you need to have confidence. The fortunate part is that confidence can be built and developed over time. You just have to practice. You can work on your confidence as a presenter on a daily basis and keep working on it forever. Building confidence is like building muscle. You need to work on it with discipline for it to grow and develop. Think of you as a person that can transmit ideas, emotions, and dreams, and your brain will believe it too. By the way, talking about this, next Tuesday, we are going to talk about precisely how you can train your brain to retain information and also to believe you. The counterexamples that I presented, yeah, they are taken. Oh, and I have lots of that kind of counterexample, but I try to make it, short. Now, energy. It is contagious. You go to see dynamic and animated speakers because they energize and inspire. You don't want to rob your audience of your energy. You want to infect them and to spread your energy like wildfire. If you are not a dynamic speaker, then that is just your conditioning and your self-image. Be confident on your possibility to be an energetic speaker. Start by taking acting and improvisation classes or watching videos about that, and watch your expressional abilities skyrocket in a natural, not contrived way. There is nothing more boring than listening or watching a presenter who is not energetic. You cannot convince people if you are not energetic. Knowledge. Oh, this is the king in this case. To be memorable, you need to have solid knowledge. Immerse yourself in your study field and learn more than anybody you know about it. Share your insights in your presentation. Teach your audience something they have not heard before, or present a different perspective that intrigues them. The more knowledge you have, the better you will improvise. And when people ask for examples, if you know what you have talked about, you will be able to create novel examples, some examples that nobody have talked about before. Clarity. No one wants to hear a rambling speaker. The moment you start rambling, people will begin to tune you out. Have clarity. With it comes to your ideas, opinions, philosophy, and belief. Once you are clear and focused, start by communicating your thought while continuing to modify and clarify them even more. Remember that clarity comes from preparation. Interactivity. Public speaking is a type of dance, just like salsa and tango. Public speaking requires that you interact with your partner. In the case of public speaking, your partner is the audience. Ask them questions, interact with them, and tease them. Don't just stand in front of them without moving. Entertaining. Okay, I know what you may have been thinking. You can do everything on this list so far, but you can't do this one. Let me guess, you are not funny. But everyone can be funny. You just need to bring it out. Open your mind to be flexible enough and try it. Sense of humor is a perfect way to connect to audience. You have to practice, of course. Now, dress the part. You know, we live in a materialistic society. Therefore, you will be judged initially by how you look and what you are wearing. You can say that this is not fair or that this is not true, but surveys show that people put weight into this. So, dress the part at least for the first impression. If you have to talk in front of these people again, you can be yourself. Now, organization. A great way to be a good presenter is organizing not only the presentation, but also your performance. It ensures a smooth flow of ideas and movements. Nothing is more annoying than a presenter that doesn't know what comes next or moves back to a previous point because they forget something or move on the stage erratically. A rehearsal is always a great idea. And that's something that you have to do when you are going to defend your thesis or dissertation. You have to rehearse in front of people. And finally, but not last, it's last but not least, voice and diction. These two elements are very important in a presentation because your voice is the tool either to inform or convince. If you speak too fast or too slowly, audience will feel uncomfortable. If you don't speak clearly, the audience will be lost. A misinterpretation will emerge. If you don't project your voice, people will not hear you properly, even if you use a microphone. So presenters, like teachers and singers, need to master the peculiarities of their voice. I recommend that you search in YouTube videos about how to use your voice properly in presentations, and you will be delighted and also surprised of how you can master your voice and your diction to convince people. And remember, nobody wants to listen to somebody that says, presenters, like teachers and singers, need to master the peculiarities of their voice. Come on. Now it's time for some other hints and tricks about how to do great presentations. Adrian says, I mean nervous not just out of a stage fright, but more like having a nervous personality overall. What is if the presenter is knowledgeable but uncomfortable? Nervous, that person has to practice and practice a lot in order to control their nerves. That's absolutely important, because if they don't do that, they are going to begin rambling, and that's awful. We are going to talk about that, Maria Isabel. Just wait a minute. Let me finish, and then I can answer all your questions. Okay, here they are. They are all simple but effective things to do when presenting your ideas. Look at them. Prepare your presentation thoroughly, rehearse it, begin with attention, grab an image on the slide, and so on. I don't like to read my slides because I know that my audience know how to read. So that's a very, very important hint that I want to give it to you, and I forgot to put it here. Don't read the content of the slide unless you add things to that. Okay? People know how to read. They want you to help them interpret the content or help them apply the content. Okay? So for me, the last one is the most valuable advice I can give you. Calmness comes from being confident on you and your abilities. And enjoyment comes from your belief that you have a great message to transmit and want to share with the audience because you love them and think your message can benefit them. Apart from that, whenever you present something, that's an honor for you. Okay, so you have to be ready to enjoy what you are doing. And when I say this, I'm not talking about pretending those sentiments. It's not to pretend that I'm glad and I'm calm and I'm enjoying this. You are not cheap sellers. That's for sellers that want to sell a lemon to you. No. You are great professionals that have many ideas that can make our work better, and you need to share them. That's why you have worked hard preparing the presentation. It's not just for rewards and prestige. It's because you are part of mankind and work for it. You have to feel it and believe it. And when you do it, that reflects on your voice, movements, and enthusiasm. That's when you begin convincing people, even if they are your dissertation committee, okay? And I want to finish with these two quotes that summarize the spirit of this webinar. The first one focuses on knowledge and mastery of a topic. You cannot talk convincingly about something you don't understand or you don't know enough, while the second focuses on the other aspects of a presentation, especially in the presenter. They both guide our path through the world of great presentations. Okay, thank you for registering, and I'm open to answer your questions or listen to your comments, so on. Tell me more, tell me more. Okay. Okay, first, Marisabel, what fonts would you recommend? I think that the best ones are the straight ones, like, for instance, Railway or Calibri or Arial or Times New Roman. I think is better for writing. What I don't recommend, and experts, because I'm not an expert, I'm just a person who has learned these things, but what experts don't recommend is that you use fonts that has too many, turns and curves and kind of things that are like you are writing calligraphy or something like that. Okay? And about the color recommendation, they say that you use black letters against white or gray backgrounds, and the opposite, like you can see here, is white fonts against black backgrounds. And you can highlight ideas using the basic colors: red, blue, yellow is not a basic one, but it's a good one to highlight your ideas. But try not to use more than 2 types of fonts or 2 types of colors in one slide, because if you put too many colors on 2 different fonts, that will not be legible, and that's one of the principles of design. My pleasure, Kelly. I hope you can find these things interesting and useful, because some people have the innate ability to combine colors and to design and so on, and other people we have to learn that. But if you look at this, for instance, this is a slide which follow the principle of using lists, of using just the most important thing for each one, and white text over or against a dark background. Okay. Any other question? You know, I had problems choosing this part of the slide because I don't really like this combination, but there wasn't any other one that can be at least tolerable. But to tell you the truth, there wasn't any other one. Joanna, you like it? I think that you like it. Look at this. How can you present this? How can you read this? Chamandi, is putting animation to insert images, diagrams, unprofessional? No, not at all. In fact, if I can use animation here, because we use PDF and not PowerPoint or Google presentation, you can use animation, but try to use always the same, or at least 2 different. For example, let me show you something here to explain this to you. For instance, for each one of these slides, which has a number, that implies that it's a new section of the webinar, you can use, let's say, the kind of curtain that opens. Okay, but you use it only with the ones that show a new section is coming, and when the person look at that person doesn't pay too much attention to the movement, because that person already knows what is coming. Okay, and then if you have to use any animation with the other ones, try always the same, so the person people don't have to be distracted by the animation. That's the idea, Chamandi. Adrian, I believe most people find background colors like beige, light green, and sky blue quite pleasant to look at. Yes, of course. The most important thing is that the contrast can be done in order to improve legibility. For instance, we at PD Education, we have the purple scheme. We have a light green scheme, a little darker green scheme. We have a red one, a light blue, and no, we don't have dark blue. We have a light blue, we have a light gray, and we have a dark gray. You see? And of course, that depends on what you like, even on the topic, okay? Even in the topic. Oh, it was my pleasure, Tamandi. Any other question? Let me tell you before you go away that next week, I'm very excited about next week theme, because I will have to go into brain, how our brains process information, how our brain retain that information, what neuroscience says about that, and we're talking even about mindfulness to help you do that. Chamandi says, when I do a presentation, I feel audience reading slides rather than listening to me. Is that okay? It is if you do this. If you can do this, look at that. If you present your text in this way, that can be read very quickly, okay? Topic, and then you can begin talking about those things, expanding them, giving examples, and that catch the attention of the audience, okay? But if you write down too extensive text, that will, in certain sense, it obliges audience to read more than it is expected to. Yes, remember, 40% is the maximum of words that you can include in a slide. 40% of the slide should have or could have text. 60% has to have white space, images, and so on. But text only not more than 40% of the space of the slide. Joanna says, I won't be able to attend next week. Will there be a recording? Yes, dear, there will be. That thing sounds fascinating. It is. It is. But don't worry. Register for that, and you are going to receive the recording and the presentation. Both things. Yes, for me, it's a very interesting theme. The theme was selected by Dr. Alnett, taking into account what deans and other people have talked about, but I really, really like this because I have been researching about neuroscience, about quantum physics, and and about mindfulness. So that will be great. Oh, Marisabel, I hope you register for that too. Okay. And after that, the next week, April the 27th, I'm going to get back to presentation, but in this case, to poster presentation, which they are different. Mindfulness, empty the mind so it can be filled. In fact, it is not to empty your mind, Adrian. It's to focus your mind, which is different. It's very, very difficult to empty your mind, and that is achieved by very few people. Yep. But the key is that you guide your mind to focus on what you want it to be focused. Okay. And the idea is to avoid what Buddha called the rambling monkey. That monkey that we have in our brain that goes from one thought to another, to another, to another one, to another one. And at the end, we are, in fact, tired. We get tired of having that jumping monkey. No, it's not to focus on nothing. It's to focus on something. The key is that you choose what that something is. It's different. Yeah. You begin focusing, for instance, in your breath, in the movement of air inside you, and then you may be focusing on a specific number, and you move that number in your mind from a clockwise or counterclockwise way, and you can paint it with different colors. So it's to focus on something that you choose and not that your mind chooses at random. Okay? Erica, it was nice to see you here again. Any other question, or may I stop the recording? Let me stop the recording. Thank you, everybody, for registering and especially for attending.